The sky over Kalor 9 was always crimson, thick with dust and ash, a reminder that life on the fringe of human space came with blood and fire. Captain Thorne stood on the battered watchtower, eyes locked on the horizon where the sun never really set, but instead bled across the ground like an open wound. He wasn't stationed here by choice. No one was. Kalor 9 was a penal colony disguised as a mining outpost, a place where ex-soldiers, broken men, and forgotten bastards were dumped under the excuse of civil duty. Thorne had killed too many in the sovereign rebellions to go back to normal life. Earth didn't want killers walking its pristine streets, so they shipped him here to die slowly in silence, mining rare minerals for the bloated mouths of the Galactic Federation. Still, even in exile, he carried himself like a soldier. The other men respected that, or feared it. It started with static on the long-range channel. Garbled noise. Then silence. Then the satellites started blinking out, one by one. They thought it was solar interference, maybe a freak plasma storm. But deep down, every one of them knew. It wasn't nature. It was something worse. At 0300 hours, the sky tore open. The bombardment was silent from the inside of the bunker, but when they emerged, there was nothing. The colony wasn't attacked. It was erased. Children, women, workers, the infirm. Gone. Burnt shadows on concrete. Ash where lungs used to breathe. The smell of scorched flesh still clung to the air like it was too stubborn to leave. And above it all, hanging in the skies like gods come to judge, were the Varnac dreadships. 10 of them. Black, chitin-plated vessels with veins of glowing green. They hovered with arrogance. No warning, no demands, no declaration of war. Just extermination. Thorne didn't speak when he saw the destruction. He walked through the rubble like a ghost. His eyes didn't blink. His fists stayed clenched. The other survivors, what few remained, watched him, waiting for orders because instincts don't die. And the instinct told them this man wasn't going to beg or run. He was going to kill. "What do we do, Cap?" one of the miners-turned soldiers asked, cradling a bleeding arm. "We can't fight that. We don't even have a signal tower." Thorne stared at the black sky. "We won't signal for help." A pause. "Then we're dead." "No," Thorne said, voice low and sharp. "They are." They didn't understand. Not yet, but they would. Kalor 9 had been filled with outcasts, murderers, mercenaries, soldiers with dishonorable discharges, men who had nothing left to lose. Now they had something. Vengeance. It took 2 days to rig the distress probe. He loaded it with coordinates, encryption codes, and one message. Kalor 9. Civilian massacre by Varnac fleet. Unprovoked. No survivors. To any remaining human command. You created us to fight your wars. You exiled us when peace was no longer profitable. Now let us do what we were made for. Give us a fleet, or give us nothing. We will burn them either way. The probe launched. It wouldn't reach Earth for 6 days. In the meantime, Thorne gathered the wreckage. He started forging weapons out of the ruins. Drones were converted into EMP mines. Power cores ripped from broken generators became explosives. And in the shadows of genocide, something ancient was reborn. The will to fight. The 5th night after the massacre. The temperature on Kalor 9 dropped below freezing. Winds sliced across the ruins, howling through twisted rebar and charred frames of what once were homes, schools, and shelters. But deep in the old mining tunnels, beneath a slab of concrete disguised as just another collapsed wall, the survivors were not mourning. They were planning a war. Captain Thorne stood shirtless in the center of the dim chamber. His body was marked with burn scars and inked in faded military tattoos, some of which were older than the younger men gathered around him. A rusted table served as their war map, and scattered across it were blueprints salvaged from the colony's backup servers, coupled with rough sketches drawn in coal and blood. There were 23 survivors, all men. No heroes, no politicians, no diplomats, just killers, rejects, and the type of men Earth never wrote history books about. And yet here they were, rising from the ashes, forged by loss and hate. "We can't wait for Earth," Thorne said, pointing at a blinking dot on a torn star chart. "If they come, it'll be a PR stunt. Too late, too clean. They'll negotiate, ask for peace, talk about apologies." He looked up. His eyes were dead calm. "We're not asking for peace." One of the men, Davins, a former dropship pilot court-martialed for striking a superior officer, leaned forward. "Then what's the play, Cap? We got scraps and hollow threats. They've got capital ships." Thorne moved a piece across the map, a black rock marked with a red X. "They missed something. Varnac don't understand desperation. They don't understand what happens when you massacre broken men and leave a few alive." He tapped the map. "Here, Sector L9, old weapons cache, Cold War era, before the treaties, buried and written off. I used to guard that sector during the border conflicts. Still has a hangar bay underneath." Davins narrowed his eyes. "You think it's still stocked?" "I know it is. Earth forgot it, but I didn't. And we're taking it." Someone scoffed from the back. Merrick, a bitter sniper with tremors in his right hand and a history of friendly fire. "And how the hell are we getting there? Half the Varnac fleet is still in orbit, like vultures waiting for the smell of hope." Thorne's lips curled into a humorless grin. "We're going to give them what they want." The decoy was built using parts of the mining equipment. They disguised it as a short-range escape pod, made it broadcast fake life signs, and set its thrusters toward the next nearest human outpost. A bait. When the Varnac ship descended to destroy it, just another extermination to keep the body count clean, Thorne and his men struck. They'd spent 3 days crafting improvised plasma rifles from generator coils. It wasn't clean. It wasn't efficient, but it was brutal. They moved like phantoms, crawling through ash-covered terrain and slipping beneath sensor lines. The moment the Varnac landed, the explosives went off. Not pretty, loud, messy. The sky turned green with Varnac blood and fire. Thorne moved like a machine, unblinking, efficient. He dragged one of the Varnac captains out of the wreckage by the neck, shoved a barrel into its jaw, and waited for its black eyes to focus. "You think you know war?" he whispered. "You've never seen what happens when humans stop pretending to be civilized." Then he pulled the trigger. They captured the ship intact, damaged but flyable, barely. "Get us to L9?" Thorne said, voice hard as iron. The trip through dead space took 9 hours. The stolen Varnac cruiser groaned the whole way, its systems hating human hands. Lights flickered. Oxygen was thin. No beds, no food, just steel, smoke, and silence. Men took turns resting on the floor, curled up with weapons they barely knew how to reload. As they approached Sector L9, something strange happened. No one tried to stop them. Not a single ship. Not a sensor ping. The entire region was dead silent. "Something's wrong," Davins said from the pilot's seat. "This was contested space during the rebellions. Someone should have claimed it." Thorne didn't answer. He didn't need to. He knew. The Federation had erased this place, buried it like a war crime they didn't want in the books. But it also meant no one had touched it in decades. As they neared the coordinates, the automated defense grid triggered. Blue lights lit up in the asteroid belt. Dozens of old cannons turned on and locked onto their stolen ship. "Tell me you can hack it," Merrick muttered. Thorne held up a chipped dog tag. This isn't for hacking. He walked to the panel and slotted the tag into the reader. The screen blinked, then flashed green. Access granted Captain Adrian Thorne. Authorized user. Code. Blackfire. The hangar opened like a sleeping god yawning after a century of rest. Inside was a graveyard of forgotten war machines, and every last one of them was still functional. They spent the next 8 days restoring the base. Food was synthesized, power rerouted, AI systems rebooted, old security protocols wiped and rewritten. The base had weapons Earth hadn't deployed in over 50 years. Weapons that had been banned, antimatter charges, dark light missiles, cloaked drones, EMP spiders, orbital skinners, old-school fire-and-forget nukes with fail-safe overrides. Technology so unstable that even the most hardened generals back on Earth had chosen diplomacy over deploying them. But Thorne? He welcomed the madness. They fitted the stolen Varnac cruiser with hybrid tech, alien shields, human engines, and weapons from hell. They painted it black with a red stripe across its side. A warning. They called it Judgment. And it wasn't alone. 7 other ships were resurrected from the base, stripped, repaired, rearmed. Each man became a captain, whether he wanted to be or not. They trained day and night in zero-G drills, target acquisitions, boarding simulations. There was no luxury, no forgiveness for mistakes. One of the younger men broke down during a drill, panicking during a decompression test. Thorne didn't yell. He stood over him, silent, staring with those cold, pale eyes. Then he said, "They burned your daughter in that colony. Crying won't change that. Killing them will. Get up." And the boy did. Every single one of them did. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were monsters built by loss. The 9th day, a signal came through. Not from Earth, not from any colony, but from the Varnac fleet, encrypted in their tongue. But Thorne's systems decrypted it, one agonizing syllable at a time. To the human anomaly occupying the dead sector, surrender. You are outnumbered. The Color 9 operation was authorized. You are not recognized under any sovereign flag. Resistance is suicide. You will not be warned again. Thorne leaned in. He typed a reply. Warning received. Return to your masters. Tell them the ashes of Color 9 are coming to collect. No flag, no politics, just vengeance. We are the Armada, and you've made our purpose clear. He sent it, then he deleted it. They weren't doing this for speeches. They were doing it for retribution. The first raid happened on a Varnac refueling station orbiting Kes Theta. No announcement, no ceremony. The Judgment decloaked 3 clicks away, fired all 6 plasma rods into the station's core, and warped out in under 10 seconds. The blast wiped the system's moon off the star map. The second strike was worse. They boarded a Varnac science vessel. No military value. Just labs. They found documents. Charts. Blueprints showing how Kalor 9 was selected. The scientists inside had studied human emotional responses, pain thresholds, trauma recovery times. Kalor 9 had been an experiment. Thorne executed every one of them. Personally. No mercy. No trials. This wasn't justice. This was vengeance. Soon, the Varnac started reacting. They dispatched fleets, patrols, started locking down sectors, activating protocols that hadn't been touched since the human Varnac Cold era. But they were too late. Thorne had already activated deep codes embedded in the old bases scattered throughout forgotten space. Dozens of other rejected colonies, dumping grounds for humanity's undesirables, had received the message, and one by one, they answered. He wasn't just leading a crew anymore. He was building a movement, a human revenant force formed from men Earth had abandoned. Thorne stood in the command bay of the Judgment, staring at a live feed of the next target, a Varnac orbital city floating above a gas giant. Population 40,000, civilians, politicians, generals, All part of the machine. He didn't hesitate. "We strike in 10, he said. Davins frowned. "You sure? No demands? No threats?" Thorne's jaw tensed. "They gave us no warning. We return the favor." The Judgment's thrusters lit up like hellfire. The sky was about to fall again, only this time it would fall on the Varnac. The orbital city over Verda 3 didn't stand a chance. No alarms, no evacuation, just black space, and then white hell. The Judgment and its sister ships exited warp less than 4 kilometers from the city's central ring. They launched in silence. 8 ships armed to the teeth with relic weapons the rest of humanity had buried deep and promised never to speak of again. A wall of torpedoes streaked across the void, glowing like falling stars. The first barrage turned the agricultural bays into a burning hole. The second melted the sky bridge. By the time the third wave of drones struck, it was already over. The entire station, fortified, shielded, and home to tens of thousands, was reduced to metal carcass and drifting corpses. No survivors, no speeches, no remorse. This was the cost of genocide. Thorne stood on the bridge of the Judgment, hands behind his back, eyes locked on the screen as debris scattered across the stars. For a moment, he said nothing. He just watched as the Varnac's civilization cracked like brittle bone. Davins stepped up beside him. His voice was low, uncertain. "Cap, you saw the last section? There were non-combatants in there." Thorne's stare didn't waver. "They were complicit." Davins didn't argue. There was no room for that here. This wasn't a morality mission. This wasn't Earth's type of war with clean kills and televised pity. This was revenge. And revenge didn't care about innocence. 2 days later, they received a message. One Thorne hadn't expected, and it wasn't from the Varnac. It was from Earth, High Command, encrypted, top priority, buried under a dozen security layers. The AI translated the voice. Cold, female, bureaucratic to the bone. "Adrian Thorne, you are hereby ordered to cease hostilities against the Varnac Confederacy. Your unauthorized attacks have disrupted intergalactic treaties, risked human Varnac diplomatic standings, and endangered fragile peace corridors. Stand down. Immediately. Surrender all vessels to the nearest authorized outpost. This is your final warning. Failure to comply will result in your designation as a rogue warlord under Article 77 of the Colonial Warfare Act. Earth will not protect you." Silence hung in the command deck like poison. Then the men started laughing. It wasn't humor, it was disbelief, disgust, fury, Davins cursed. "They waited until now? After Color 9 got nuked into nothing? After we buried children with our bare hands? Now they want to lecture us?" Merrick spat on the floor. "Screw Earth. They left us to rot years ago." Thorne didn't laugh. He stared at the message again, watched the lines scroll across. "Warlord," he muttered. "That's what they call me now." He turned, voice sharp enough to cut steel. "Then so be it." They stopped hiding after that. No more stealth strikes. No more hit-and-runs. The Armada of Vengeance went public. Their next target was a Varnac dry dock facility at Veltraz Sea, a superstructure 5 kilometers wide where Varnac dreadnoughts were built and refitted. This time, Thorne broadcast a message. Live, unencrypted, sent across 50 systems. To every species listening, Color 9 was wiped out in silence. Earth turned its back. The Varnac laughed. "You let it happen. So now we bring fire. This is not war. This is retribution. If you stand with them, burn with them. Within hours." Galactic news feeds erupted in panic. Treaty representatives issued emergency statements. Human diplomats disavowed Thorne's actions, called him a terrorist, a factional embarrassment, a relic of Earth's violent past. But on the fringes of colonized space, where miners and forgotten veterans scraped to survive, Thorne became a symbol of rage, of strength, of what humanity used to be when it had teeth. The assault on Veltraz Sea was the bloodiest yet. They met resistance for the first time, 3 Varnac warships and hundreds of fighter drones. It didn't matter. Thorne's armada fought like demons. The Judgment took 3 direct hits, lost shields, and kept going. Plasma fires roared across the hull. Men screamed, steel buckled. But Thorne didn't retreat. He ordered a full-speed ramming run through the dry dock's central spine. At impact, the Judgment's nose punctured clean through the reinforced core. Internal charges detonated, flooding the station with fire and rupturing the gravitational core. The explosion was visible from orbit. Afterward, they counted their dead. 14 men gone, burned, crushed, vented into space, each one buried in silence, ejected from the airlock wrapped in scorched banners made from scrap metal. No speeches, just a toast of recycled whiskey and clenched jaws. "We kill them until they remember our names," Thorne said quietly, and they drank to that. Back on Earth, panic set in. Protests broke out in megacities as word spread of Kalor 9's erasure and Earth's silence. A leaked report showed that the Federation had known about the Varnac plans weeks in advance. A deal had been struck, a quiet one. Let Kalor 9 fall to avoid full war, collateral damage, expendable lives. The revelation broke the illusion. Now Earth had a problem. Its people were starting to agree with Thorne. That's when they sent the Hammer. An elite fleet, no politics, no restraint. 3 carriers, 4 dreadnoughts, 30 escort ships, the best humanity had. They were sent not to negotiate. They were sent to erase Thorne. The Hammer found the Armada in the outer rings of the Soren system, setting up a forward station. The Armada had grown. 16 ships now, many jury-rigged and held together with fury and duct tape, but each one carrying men who had seen too much to ever go home. Thorne stood on the bridge as the Earth fleet dropped out of warp. Massive, shining, untouched by war. They hailed him. "Captain Thorne, this is Admiral Jaren under direct orders from Earth High Command. You are outgunned. Stand down. Surrender your ships and crew. You will be taken alive if you comply. This is not a negotiation." Thorne didn't flinch. He activated his own comms and opened the channel to every ship on both sides. "Admiral Jaren, you wear the uniform I used to kill for. You hide behind orders I used to believe in. But tell me this, did Earth send you to avenge Kalor 9, or to silence the ones who didn't die quietly?" Silence. "I watched children burn in their sleep. I held men who died choking on ash. I begged for help, and Earth looked away. So now we speak in a language you forgot. Fire, blood, revenge. We're not standing down. You want us? Come bleed for it." The battle began 30 minutes later. The Hammer opened with shock missiles, EMP pulses designed to disable. But Thorne had anticipated it. The Armada's ships scattered, hiding behind asteroid fields, deploying stealth drones laced with raw uranium shells. It was chaos, human against human. Old brothers turned enemies. But there was a difference. The Armada fought with fury, reckless, desperate. They weren't trying to survive. They were trying to make every ship that fired on them regret it. 2 of the Hammer's carriers went down, one ripped open by a suicide run, the other hit with a stolen Varnac Skinner bomb that stripped armor like paper. The Judgment took another hit, losing the starboard guns. Thorne was thrown against a bulkhead, blood running down his face, but he crawled back up. "Keep firing," he growled. "Don't stop until every last one of them remembers Kalor 9. After 3 hours, the Hammer retreated. They hadn't expected resistance like this, and Earth hadn't expected its best to lose. That night, the Armada celebrated. Not like victors, but like men who knew they wouldn't last much longer, but would make their end mean something. Thorne sat in silence, staring at a photo pulled from the ruins of Kalor 9. A little girl in a blue dress, smiling. She couldn't have been more than 7. He traced her face with a bloody fingertip. "I don't even know her name," he whispered. Behind him, Merrick spoke. "We're making them remember, Cap, one by one." Thorne nodded slowly. "Not enough. Not yet." The dead girl in the photograph haunted Thorne. Not because of who she was, but because he didn't know. He didn't know her name, her family, her voice, whether she screamed when the Varnac bombs dropped, or if it was over before she could open her eyes. She represented every life Earth wrote off as acceptable loss. And now, as he stared out the cracked viewport of the Judgment, patched up, scorched but still running, he felt it again. That creeping rot. That voice he'd buried in his gut. This isn't just revenge anymore, it's something else. After the hammer limped away from Soren, Earth went silent. Not a word. Not a whisper. Like they were recalculating, shifting pieces around the board. But Thorne didn't wait. He had leads, data shards ripped from the wreckage of Varnac science vessels, encrypted logs that Merrick and Davins had been digging through non-stop. At first, it all looked like dry bureaucratic garbage. But Davins had a knack for finding meaning in the mess. He wasn't just a soldier, he was a tracker, a hound for hidden truths, and what he found made his blood run cold. "It wasn't just Kalor 9, Davins said one night, pulling Thorne aside in the tactical bay. "There were more." Thorne's jaw clenched. "What do you mean, more?" "4 colonies, not as big, scattered, remote, not all human, but the Varnac hit them too. Exact same method. No warning, no demand, just full deletion. And here's the kicker, every one of them had a joint research station." Thorne narrowed his eyes. "Joint? As in Varnac and human?" "Bingo." Davins tapped a string of decrypted lines on the screen. "We thought Kalor 9 was just about resources, or vengeance, but this was about control, suppression, silence." He leaned in. They weren't just exterminating people, Cap. They were covering something up. The break came from a corrupted AI log recovered from one of the research pods orbiting the wreckage of Kalor 9. Merrick spent 6 sleepless nights patching the fragments together, recoding the translation layer by hand. It was an old project name. Project Veilfire. At first glance, it sounded like another Black Ops experiment, but the data went deeper, older. This wasn't post-war, this was pre-Federation, before the Varnac treaties. Before Kalor 9 even existed. The project was human-led, but Varnac-funded. A joint endeavor cloaked under planetary defense research. But what they were researching wasn't weapons. It was people, human minds, pain tolerance, emotional trauma, the neurological pathways of grief and vengeance, the very things that made humans unpredictable in warfare. Davins scrolled through page after page of test logs. They ran simulations, thousands. They induced death scenarios in AI models, then tested psychological breakdowns in cloned minds. They were trying to find a way to predict us. Merrick chimed in from the corner, bitter. "They couldn't understand how we fought, how we came back after losing everything, so they studied us like lab rats." Thorne stared at the screen, then down at his own shaking hands. He knew that feeling. The rage that made you see red. The emptiness that made you charge into a fleet with no backup and no hope. He looked back at the logs. They'd weaponized it, And when they realized they couldn't control it, they buried it, with bombs, with genocide, with Kelor 9. The truth changed everything. The Armada wasn't just a rogue fleet anymore. They were the result of Project Veilfire. They were the experiment the Varnac couldn't finish, and Earth wouldn't dare acknowledge. "That's why they let Kelor 9 burn," Thorne muttered, pacing the room like a caged animal. It wasn't just political, it was containment. "They couldn't let this slip out." Merrick scoffed. "So they built monsters, and now they're afraid of what we became." Thorne slammed his fist into the table, denting the steel. "They should be." The next move had to be different. This wasn't about sending a message anymore. It was about exposing the whole game. Thorne needed proof, something undeniable, and he knew where to get it. The Varnac Core Archive, buried inside a diplomatic station orbiting the neutral world of Eshar. Technically untouchable. A library for interspecies cooperation. Sacred, according to treaties, which meant Earth would never bomb it, and Varnac wouldn't risk contaminating their own holy archive. That's where Thorne went. They arrived cloaked, under false IFF codes, a dead merchant vessel from a forgotten sector. Escher shimmered below, a green jewel in black space. The archive station floated above it. Peaceful, untouched by war. They boarded at midnight cycle. No alarms, no guards, just protocol droids and floating archivists with no loyalty to blood or politics. They found the server core in a sealed chamber 3 floors beneath the diplomatic dome. Davins cracked it in 20 minutes. What they found was worse than even Thorne expected. Video logs, meeting recordings, black budget signatures, human diplomats, Varnac generals, together, authorizing Kelor 9. Not just letting it happen, but planning it. Containment is preferable to confrontation. Project Veilfire must not fall into civilian hands. Collateral loss, acceptable within the outlined projections. Thorne watched the files in silence. No one spoke. The final video showed a familiar face, Admiral Jaren, the very one who'd led the hammer against them. If the fringe colonies must die to preserve galactic peace, so be it. History will forget them. The feed cut. Thorne's fists trembled. Not from fear, from restraint. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was a cover-up of a war crime. They didn't just ignore Kelor 9. They murdered it to bury their past. Thorne uploaded every file to the Armada's mainframe. Then he sent a message. Not encrypted, not hidden. To every world, every ship, every system, a full info dump, visual proof, audio proof, classified memos, body counts, footage of the burning colony, the screams, the silence afterward. He attached a single sentence at the end. "You wanted to know why we fight? This is why. This is what Earth buried in ash. This is what the Varnac paid for with blood." The galaxy lit up like wildfire. Protests turned to riots. Federation buildings on Earth were firebombed. The Varnac consulate in the inner colonies was stormed. Even military officers began to desert. Soldiers who'd once seen Thorne as a traitor now saw him as a truth-teller. The Armada of Vengeance became more than a rogue fleet. It became a revolution. More ships joined. More defectors came. Entire colonies swore allegiance, not to Earth, not to the Federation, but to justice. A justice born in fire, led by a man Earth tried to forget. But Earth wasn't done. They couldn't afford to be. And this time, they sent someone worse than the hammer. Not ships, not armies. They sent a ghost, a man named Commander Ralick, Thorne's former squad leader. Presumed dead. A tactician. A butcher. The only man Thorne had ever followed without question, and the only man Thorne had ever betrayed. Now he was alive. And he was coming, with a single ship, and a promise. To finish what Kalor 9 started. The name Ralick hit Thorne like a blade sliding between the ribs. He hadn't heard it in years, not since the Sandrea operation, not since the last time he wore Earth's flag on his shoulder and believed in orders more than his own conscience. Ralick was never loud, never showy. He was the kind of man who killed you quietly, left your body in a ditch, and walked away without emotion. A perfect soldier, the type the Federation used when they wanted something done without it ever being spoken of again. And now they had sent him to silence Thorne. Not a fleet, not a bomb, just one man. Because they knew that Ralick wasn't coming to fight. He was coming to end it. The message came across encrypted military channels, old codes that only worked if you once had the rank to use them. It played automatically in the Judgment's command deck. The voice was calm, mechanical, not a threat, a promise. Adrian, you made your point. You turned yourself into the thing they were afraid of. Now they've turned me loose. You and I both know how this ends. Come alone. No fleet, no crew, no theatrics, one-on-one. At the graveyard, Sector 7 Lambda. Where it all started. Thorne didn't hesitate. Prep my pod, he ordered. Davins stepped forward instantly. No way, Cap. This is suicide. You think he's coming alone? I don't care. You don't walk into a ghost's hands, not when we've come this far. Thorne's voice was ice. I gave Ralick my loyalty once. I broke it when I exposed what they were doing. He doesn't need tricks. If he wants me dead, it won't be with fleets. Merrick spat. What if he's already planted charges across the asteroid belt? What if he's got a whole goddamn battalion waiting? Then I die, Thorne said, turning his back. But I won't let anyone else bleed for the ghosts I left behind. He flew alone, one man, one ship, stripped of weapons, save for a plasma blade locked beneath the console. The old kind, manual trigger, exposed core, unstable if overused. A relic for a relic. The flight to Sector 7 Lambda took 6 hours. It was a forgotten place, a battlefield from the sovereign rebellions, long since silenced. The dead still floated there, thousands of suits and hull fragments orbiting a moon cracked down the middle. No one salvaged here. It was cursed ground, a place where orders went too far and soldiers stopped being men. It was where Thorne and Ralick first became killers, where they stopped asking questions. He landed on an old Federation cruiser, rusted and buried in asteroid rock. The hangar was partially sealed, atmosphere flickering in and out. As he stepped onto the cracked floor, his boots crunched glass and bone. And there he was. Ralick. Same posture, same face. Time hadn't touched him, just hardened what was already cold. He wore no insignia, just black. A thin scar ran across his jaw now, but his eyes were the same steel-gray voids that used to watch Thorne's back without flinching. Adrian, he said quietly. Ralick. No handshake, no salute. Just 2 wolves circling a grave. Ralick was the first to speak. You should have died with the others. That would have been cleaner. Thorne stepped closer. So that's it? Earth's final offer, a bullet from the past? No offer, Ralick said. I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to clean up the mess. Thorne laughed once, hollow. The mess? You mean the truth? You mean Kalor 9? The project you knew about. You knew, Ralick. Don't lie to me. Ralick didn't flinch. I knew. We both did. We signed the same papers. You lied to them, Thorne growled, stepping into his face now. You let those families die. You let the kids burn. For what? To protect Earth's clean little fantasy of peace? It wasn't peace I protected, Ralick said. It was balance. Chaos like yours spreads. It makes martyrs out of maniacs. You're not a hero, Adrian. You're a consequence. I didn't ask to be a hero. No, Ralick said flatly. You asked to be remembered. And now they'll remember you as the man who started a war that never had to happen. They stared at each other. No wind, no music, no speeches, just memories that tasted like ash. Then Thorne said, "Let's finish it," and the blades came out. Ralick's blade hummed with perfect energy, military issue, high-efficiency plasma edge, clean, precise. Thorne's blade sputtered as it ignited, flickering blue with unstable pulses. Half dead. Just like him. Their first clash sent sparks across the chamber. Ralick moved like a machine. Precise strikes, all center mass, no emotion. Thorne fought like a storm. Wild, brutal, raw. Every strike was personal. Every movement pulled from years of buried hate. Metal screamed. The floor cracked beneath their boots. Thorne took a slice across the ribs, hissed in pain, then slammed his shoulder into Ralick's chest hard enough to send them both crashing through an old console. "Still sloppy," Ralick muttered, pushing up. Thorne bared his teeth. "Still a coward," Ralick charged. Blades met again, this time locking at the hilt, sparks showering them both. "You think this changes anything?" Ralick snarled. "You burn a few stations, kill a few diplomats, and what? You think Earth turns around and says sorry?" Thorne growled back. "I don't care if they say anything. I want them to feel it. I want every last one of those cowards to wake up screaming, remembering the day they created me." "Then you're no different from the Varnac," Ralick spat. "You're just another monster screaming for fire." "Better a monster that tells the truth," Thorne roared, "than a soldier who dies with a lie in his mouth." Ralick swept Thorne's legs, dropped him to the floor, then raised his blade for the final strike. But Thorne wasn't done. He rolled, grabbed a broken pipe, and drove it into Ralick's side, just under the armor. Ralick staggered. Blood blooming through his shirt. Thorne kicked him back and stood, breathing hard, blade flickering, nearly dead. Ralick dropped to one knee, coughing, holding his side. His hand trembled, but he still reached for his sidearm. "You'll die here, Adrian," he whispered. "Your war ends in a tomb." Thorne looked down at him, and for the first time in a long time, he felt pity. "You already died, Ralick," he said quietly. "The day you stopped questioning orders." And he turned his back. Ralick fired, but the gun jammed, old blood and debris choking the mechanism, and Thorne walked away. Not because he forgave, but because Ralick wasn't worth the bullet. Back aboard the Judgment, Thorne stitched his wound in silence. Davin stood nearby, waiting. "Well?" he asked. Thorne didn't answer right away. "He's finished," Davins raised a brow. "Dead?" "No," Thorne said. "Worse, defeated." He stood, blood still seeping from his side, his face pale, his hands shaking, but his eyes burned. "They sent their best," he said, "and he couldn't break me." The Armada grew. 3 more ships joined that week, ex-soldiers, defectors, even a few Varnac dissidents who'd seen the truth. The galaxy wasn't turning, it was fracturing, and in the middle of it stood Thorne. Not a hero, not a leader, but a weapon Earth created and couldn't unmake. The Varnac didn't speak in words anymore. Not to Thorne, not to the colonies. Not to anyone. Their response came in the form of annihilation. The planet Sarsis IV, a mid-tier trade hub known for its neutrality, was reduced to molten glass in under 12 minutes. 4 Varnac dreadships decloaked in orbit and launched thermonuclear orbital mines. The entire population, 2 million, was vaporized. Civilians, traders, children, gone. No demands, no warning, no messages, only a single transmission from Varnac High Command. relayed across all channels afterward. This is the cost of harboring insurgents. This is the price of truth. They weren't trying to hide anymore. They were making an example. When the footage reached the judgment, the command deck went silent. No one spoke. No one blinked. Thorne stood at the center, fists clenched so hard blood seeped from his palms. "They're scared," Merrick said softly. "They're lashing out." "No," Davins replied, voice sharp. "They're escalating. They know if they don't end this now, they'll lose control forever." Thorne's face was stone. "This isn't about me anymore." The others looked at him. "It's about everyone like us. Everyone they abandoned. Everyone who watched Earth make a deal with monsters and then call it peace." He stepped forward, blood trailing from his hand as he slammed a knife onto the hollow table. "Then let's give them a war they'll never recover from." But Earth wasn't going to let that happen. Hours after the fall of Sarsis IV, Earth High Command issued an emergency decree. Any world offering shelter, supplies, or aid to the Armada of Vengeance would be classified as a hostile actor. Federation ships were given carte blanche. Burn them, bomb them, no questions. Colonies that had openly supported Thorne began receiving cleansing operations. Silent ones, covert, disappearances, supply lines disrupted, communication blackouts, sabotage. Thorne's own supply route through Sector Delta 3 was ambushed by a former Earth ally. His convoy limped back to the Judgment half destroyed. Thorne knew what was coming next. Total war. Still, the Armada grew. More ships, more desperate men. Even some alien mercenary bands joined, half out of hatred for the Varnac, half because Thorne paid them in stolen fuel and raw vengeance. They weren't a fleet anymore. They were a force of nature, and now they needed to strike where it mattered. A symbolic blow. A final line. That meant one thing. Varnac Prime, the homeworld, the untouchable heart of their empire, a planet surrounded by 20 defense satellites, 5 carrier fleets, and enough artillery to rip a moon in half. No sane man would attack it, which is exactly why Thorne decided to. The plan was suicide. No stealth, no cloak, no mercy. The Armada would warp in from the uncharted side of the system, avoid the standard jump gates, and force a breach through the blockade. Aimed directly at the central atmospheric dome, home to Varnac leadership, genetic archives, and what Thorne hoped still existed. The vault of Project Veilfire. That was the goal. Expose the Varnac's crimes, broadcast the original research to every species across the galaxy. Let them see the real reason Kalor 9 was turned to ash. The real reason Earth and the Varnac had worked together. The data in that vault wasn't just political. It was damning. "We'll lose half the fleet just getting close," Davin said in the War Council. "Maybe more," added Merrick. "Their orbital AI alone can melt a battleship in 90 seconds. Thorne stared at the map. "If we don't go now, we lose the momentum. The galaxy's on fire. Everyone's watching. We either make them see the truth, or we die forgotten." Someone else, Captain Verda, ex-Federation, grunted. "We might die either way." Thorne's eyes didn't flinch. "Then let's make it loud." The day of the attack, the Armada of Vengeance assembled in the dead zone outside Varnac territory. 43 ships. Some barely held together with welding plates and raw hope. Others sleek and dangerous. Stolen Federation tech now painted with blood-red hulls. The crew was a mix of species now. Men, outlaws, defectors, mercs. Some believed, some didn't. But all had chosen Thorne. Because he didn't lie, he didn't plead, he didn't beg. He burned, and they followed him into hell. The assault on Varnac Prime began at 0200 hours planetary time. Thorne led the charge. The Judgment warped in first, alone. A suicide run meant to draw fire, set off alarms, force the Varnac's attention. They took the bait. 17 orbital cannons locked onto the Judgment. 8 carriers launched fighters. But behind Thorne, ripping into real space like monsters from myth, came the rest of the Armada. Missiles screamed, EMP nets flared, half the Varnac blockade scrambled in confusion. They hadn't expected a full assault. Not here, not this insane. The sky above Varnac Prime turned into a graveyard. Thorne's ship was hit twice before it broke through atmosphere. The hull was breaching, fires in engineering, casualties mounting. But he didn't turn back. He punched through the clouds, guided by raw will and outdated intel, diving toward the central dome like a missile wrapped in vengeance. The dome's defense field activated. Too late. The Judgment smashed through the outer layers, slammed into the surface, skidded across steel streets, and came to a smoking halt just outside the vault compound. Thorne stood in the wreckage, coughing blood. Only 8 men survived the crash. They followed him into the smoke. The vault was buried beneath 6 floors of reinforced alloy. The Varnac elite had already begun evacuating. Security bots engaged them. Drones dropped from above. Gas flooded the lower levels. They didn't stop. They fought hand to hand in the blood-slicked corridors, gunning down everything in their way. Screams echoed off steel. Explosions ruptured the floor. At one point, Merrick was dragged down by a swarm of spider drones, detonated a grenade under his chest to take them all with him. By the time they reached the vault, only Thorne and Davins were left, and they were bleeding from every inch of their bodies. The vault door required biometric clearance. Thorne didn't have it, but a dead Varnac officer lying nearby did. They dragged the body, jammed its palm on the reader, and the door hissed open. Inside, rows and rows of servers, files, footage, logs, proof of everything. Thorne didn't hesitate. He plugged in the transmitter. The files uploaded, straight to the Armada's command fleet, and from there to every colony, every system, every communication beacon they could reach. The truth flooded the galaxy like a virus. Project Veilfire, the experiments, the simulations, the alliance with Earth, the plan to burn Calor 9 as a live demonstration of emotional collapse in human populations. All of it, live, unfiltered, unforgivable. Outside, the Varnac forces began collapsing. The blockade cracked under the weight of rebellion. Ships defected mid-battle. One Federation dreadnought, piloted by a rogue Earth admiral, turned on its own formation and opened fire on the Varnac main cruiser. What began as vengeance was now a revolution. But in the vault, the building shook, explosives planted in the foundation. The Varnac had rigged the site for self-destruct. Davins looked at Thorne. "We can't get out." Thorne didn't argue. He stared at the servers, now flickering red, and sat down beside them. "Doesn't matter?" Davins gave a bitter smile. "Hell of a way to go out." "Better than being forgotten," Thorne whispered. The ceiling groaned. Metal screamed. As the vault collapsed, Thorne closed his eyes and whispered something into the mic, the last transmission he would ever send. "You erased Calor 9. You tried to erase us. Now we've erased you. History won't forget." The dead scream louder than lies. Then the world turned white. Thorne died a war criminal. To Earth, he would forever be marked as a traitor, a terrorist, a rogue. But in the years that followed, statues rose in the colonies. Men told stories. Families whispered his name like a prayer. He became the face of vengeance, of unforgiving truth. And as the Varnac Empire fractured, as Earth's leadership crumbled under the weight of uncovered war crimes, the one name that remained carved into the ashes of it all was Thorne, the man they couldn't break, the fire they couldn't put out. It took 3 days for the dust to settle over Varnac Prime. By then, the vault was nothing but a crater. The Judgment, nothing but fragments, and Adrian Thorne, nothing but a name echoing across comms and headlines. But names have power. And this one had turned into a banner, not just for vengeance, for something deeper, something more dangerous. Defiance. The first to step forward was Weller Cade, a former logistics officer under Thorne's command. Younger, more composed, but hardened by the same scars. Cade wasn't a firebrand like Thorne. He didn't lead with rage, he led with conviction. He was the one who picked up the fragments of the broken Armada and turned them into a cause. Within a week of the Vault's broadcast, over 80 fringe colonies had cut ties with the Federation and the Varnac Confederacy. Dozens of Earth-aligned captains resigned their commissions, citing war crimes and betrayal. Cade took command without ceremony. He stood on the battered deck of the Ardent Vow, once a Federation patrol ship, now painted matte gray with a single blood-red stripe across the hull. At his side were a few of Thorne's surviving officers, Davins, still limping from the Varnac raid, and a man named Keir, an ex-engineer turned tactical ops. Between them, they built something new. The Iron Accord. A coalition of free colonies, defected ships, and broken survivors, each one bonded by a single truth. Thorne was right. The system is built on silence, and silence is the enemy of justice. Earth panicked. High Command collapsed within days of the Vault data reaching public comms. Investigations turned into purges. A full-scale military mutiny erupted in the Mars garrisons. By the end of the month, 3 admirals were executed in secrecy. Too little, too late. The Federation's facade shattered, and in the vacuum left behind, opportunists rose. Some wanted justice, others wanted power. One of them, Commander Hale, wasn't interested in either. He wanted vengeance. Hale was a different kind of monster. Not like Thorne, not even like Ralick. Hale was political, polished, but born from blood. The kind of man who smiled while signing off on planetary purges, who read books of philosophy while orbital strikes turned cities into ash. He saw what Thorne had done, not just the destruction, but the myth left behind. And he knew something the others didn't. You don't kill a myth with bullets, you kill it with doubt. So Hale launched Operation Smokespire, a multi-tiered disinformation campaign designed not to crush the Iron Accord, but to corrupt it from the inside. Fake transmissions, planted leaders, false rescue convoys filled with assassins. In 1 week, 2 Allied colonies were bombed during humanitarian drops. The third, Estera 5, was infected with a synthetic plague tailored to mimic radiation poisoning. Thousands died before Cade's med officers realized it was engineered. Cade saw the play. This wasn't warfare, it was psychological erosion. He knew Hale wasn't aiming at his ships. He was aiming at the faith Thorne left behind. But Cade didn't break. He hardened, and in his first open address, he didn't make a speech. He made a vow. He stood before a camera on a scorched outpost deep in the Verge sector, blood still on his hands from a recent skirmish, and said, "They burned Kalor 9. They buried Thorne. Now they come for our minds. So hear me now. If you want safety, go back to Earth and crawl beneath your master's feet. But if you want justice, you fight, with every breath, with every wound, until they choke on our ashes." The broadcast went viral. It was raw, real, unfiltered, exactly like Thorne. But Hale wasn't watching Cade. He was watching Davins, because Davins had something no one else did, a backup shard from Thorne's personal logs, retrieved just before the vault collapsed, an AI-ciphered chip loaded with encrypted protocols, off the book's mission outlines, and one final classified message from Thorne himself. No one had cracked it. Davins carried it in a vial around his neck, closest thing to a religion he had left. And Hale wanted it. The ambush came on Draelus Moon during a refueling run. Davins had stepped away from the Ardent Vow to oversee the base's supply chain. Keir had warned him it was too exposed, but Davins didn't care. He was tired of running, tired of the weight of memory. He just wanted fuel. Instead, he got fire. 3 drop pods smashed into the landing platform. Hale's agents, dressed in Accord colors, opened fire the second they hit the ground. Davins ran through smoke and blood, pistol drawn, yelling into his comm for backup. One of the agents clipped his leg. Another lunged from behind, driving him to the floor. But Davins didn't beg. He reached under his coat, grabbed the vial, and crushed it in his own hand, embedding the data chip into his palm, deep under shredded skin. He stared at the killer above him and spat blood in his eye. "You want it? Dig!" A second later, a sniper round blew the agent's skull open. Keir had arrived, along with a squad of loyalists. They dragged Davins back onto the transport, half-conscious and bleeding out. But he lived. And so did the shard. Cade was livid. "You nearly died for a damn ghost." Davins, arm in a sling, bandaged from chest to ankle, just smiled. "It's not about the ghost, it's about what he left behind." Keir dropped the portable decryptor on the table. 3 hours later, they cracked it. Inside the shard was Protocol Blackroot, a dead man's contingency plan, written by Thorne himself. It was brutal, unethical, and devastating. Blackroot was a fail-safe, a hidden worm buried in Varnac and Earth systems alike, triggered by the Vault's upload, designed to lie dormant until the right series of movements occurred. Thorne hadn't just exposed them, he'd set a trap, and they'd walked right into it. With one final trigger, an access code locked behind biometric DNA matching only Davins and Thorne, Cade could unleash Blackroot. A coordinated crash of intergalactic defense systems, drone fleets rerouted, fuel pipelines cut, supply chains corrupted, defense algorithms rewritten to ignore enemy tags. It wouldn't destroy the enemy, but it would blind them, long enough for a full strike. Keir hesitated. "If we do this, there's no turning back. No more diplomacy, no more talks." Cade nodded. "Good, let the liars burn." Davins raised a toast from his bed. "To Thorne." The message was sent that night. One simple transmission, 5 words. Blackroot blooms at dawn, and the galaxy shifted. Back on Earth, the power grid stuttered. On Varnac, orbital AI defense arrays spun out of sync. On the outer colonies, automated Federation patrols began shooting at their own supply ships. Everything they'd built, all the tools of control, turned against them. In that window of chaos, the Iron Accord struck. Not to conquer. Not to rule, but to dismantle. To tear down every tower that had been built on the bones of Kalor 9. And with every strike, every transmission, Cade repeated the same line. "This is for the ones you erased." By the end of the month, the Federation had lost half its military grip on outer space. The Varnac were splintered. Hale disappeared after a transport explosion near Titan's Edge. No body found. And in every corner of known space, survivors carved Thorne's symbol into metal, into walls, into flesh. A broken circle, a mark of fire, a reminder that the forgotten don't stay silent. 6 months after the Blackroot activation, the galaxy was bleeding from its own arteries. Varnac space had fractured into civil war, one faction claiming innocence, another clinging to the last shreds of their genocidal pride. Entire planetary systems shut down. Defense satellites began firing without orders. Their own AI, poisoned by Thorne's code, couldn't tell friend from foe anymore. The Federation wasn't faring much better. Earth's military command was a corpse with eyes open, bloated, silent, and rotting from the inside. Every communication line buzzed with rebellion, accusations, or the sound of nothing at all. Parliament fell. Trade routes vanished, soldiers deserted by the tens of thousands, and in that void of power, the Iron Accord thrived. Weller Cade stood at the helm of a rising storm. Not just a fleet now, not even a rebellion, a new order. 37 colonies had sworn full allegiance, not to Cade, not to a flag, but to Thorne's truth. A founding document, etched on a scorched steel plate, welded to the side of the ardent vow, read, "We do not seek conquest. We do not crave titles. We only promise this. Never again will silence be paid for with innocent lives." It wasn't a government. It was a promise in blood. And like all promises born in fire, it drew enemies fast. A new force emerged from the remnants of Earth's Intelligence Bureau. They called themselves the Heirs of Order. Former strategists, AI tacticians, and Black Ops agents who believed Thorne's uprising wasn't justice, but chaos. To them, truth wasn't freedom. It was instability. And instability couldn't be allowed to grow. They struck from the shadows. Silent assassinations. Virus payloads disguised as peace offerings. They infiltrated outer systems, turned Accord captains against one another, lit brushfires of mistrust inside the very heart of Cade's fleet. One by one, small colonies began to waver. People were tired, hungry, scared. Truth was powerful, but it didn't fill a stomach. It didn't power heating units in the void. Cade knew it. And so did Davins, who sat in the medical bay with a failing lung and an old revolver across his lap. "We can't fight shadows forever," Davins said, coughing into his sleeve. "At some point, we need structure, not just speeches and oaths, something to hold this damn thing together." Cade nodded slowly, running a hand down his beard, jaw tight. "They want me to crown myself." "Maybe you should," Davins said. "Call it whatever you want. Chancellor, Marshal, whatever. But people need an anchor." Cade looked out the viewport, where the wreckage of the old Federation battlecruiser Luxian drifted aimlessly, a tomb of the old world. He whispered, almost to himself, "I swore we'd never replace the tyrants we tore down." Davins smiled bitterly. "You didn't swear not to lead, Thorne did, and look where it got him." 2 days later, the Heirs of Order made their biggest move. They hacked a broadcast satellite in neutral space and aired a falsified message across over 300 systems. It showed a deep fake of Thorne, altered to speak words he never uttered. "We do not want peace. We do not want coexistence. We want war. Until every last Varnac and collaborator is dead." The goal was obvious: to turn the galaxy against Thorne's legacy, to poison the myth from the inside. But they underestimated two things. One, the galaxy had seen too much. They had seen Kalor 9. They had seen the vault footage. They had watched as Earth burned its own people and the Varnac laughed over the bodies. No forged speech could erase that. And two, Davins had the original. Final message from Thorne, the one only he and Cade had ever seen. They broadcast it, unfiltered. No music, no polish, just Thorne's bloodied face recorded inside the vault, moments before its collapse. "I'm not a good man. I'm not a hero. I've killed more than I've saved. But they burned children, and then they lied. And I couldn't live with that. So if you're hearing this, don't let them rebuild their empire on silence. Burn it all. make them earn every inch of peace. And never, never let the truth die with me. It broke the galaxy's heart. And then it hardened it. Cade didn't take a crown. He took a blade, forged from the wreckage of the Judgment. It was embedded into a black steel pedestal in the Ardent Vows' central chamber. Any leader who took command of the Accord had to pull it free. Not by bloodline, not by vote, by burden. A reminder. Leadership wasn't privilege. It was a weight. And Cade carried it. In the final year of the war, the heirs of Order launched one last counterstrike. They reactivated Earth's ancient kill satellite array, 6 orbiting weapons platforms armed with continent-destroying plasma warheads. Their target, Iron Accord headquarters on Selena Outpost, where the surviving leadership, families, and support infrastructure of the movement now lived. Cade didn't wait. He mobilized every ship, every drone, every mercenary contract they had. The defense of Selena was hell. The sky ripped open as killsats powered up, targeting platforms glowing with deathlight. Accord forces fought like wolves in a cage, knowing if they failed, it was over. Not just for them, but for Thorne's truth. It came down to one last maneuver. Davins, half-dead and barely breathing, took a flight pod loaded with EMP warheads and crashed it into the control core of Satellite 3. His final words, radioed out through static. "Still here. You bastards? Still fighting? Say hi to Thorne for me." The satellite chain short-circuited, sparking a cascading shutdown across the entire grid. The Accord won, but at a cost that bled deep. Selena survived. The heirs were gone. Earth fell into total isolation, cut off, leaderless. The Varnac Confederacy collapsed entirely, its homeworld a shell, its politics reduced to clans fighting over ash. And in the new space between the stars, the Accord held. It was far from perfect. But it was honest, raw, unfiltered, and when new generations asked who started it, they didn't say Cade, they didn't say Davins. They said one name: Thorne. Some say he died in the vault. Others believe he escaped through a hidden corridor, disfigured, silent, watching from the shadows. A few even claim he walks among the far colonies, a ghost with a blade on his back, judging those who forget the fire he started. But the truth? He doesn't need to come back. Because his story never left.